Well, welcome to the next video in the Ultimate Half-Baked Bitcoin Analysis series. In this video, and this is the video after the prelude to the Crisis 1 and 2, we will use two example companies, two example tickers that have gone through the crisis phase. One will be an example of successfully getting through the crisis phase, and then the other one will be what I would consider a failure from a chartist perspective. So the first one we're going to cover is Amazon. We're going to just jump into the chart here. And one thing I would suggest that you keep in mind as we go through this example and these examples is the relation of the patterns and the relation to what happens here. You can look at through the lens of what we're going to talk about in Crisis 1 and Crisis 2 of Bitcoin. So we're going to start with Amazon. If you weren't around, if you weren't even born at that point in time, back in 1999, Amazon really launched as a bookseller primarily. It did have some more aspirations than that. But you'll see here back in November or December 1999, Amazon made the high. And from that point forward, it went and it sold off a full 93% from the high. And I'm not going to dive in, we're not going to get into details here, we're just going to do the broad strokes. But you can see here from that high, we can immediately start drawing some what are considered value channels. We have the value channel from the first inflection area. Remember, we talked about the inflection area in the last video. So there's a first inflection area here on Amazon. And then here is the second inflection area. Now, as far as Amazon goes, this is the first crisis for Amazon right here, right when it got down to $6, $8, right around that range. You could say based on just from a high of right around 110 or so, $111, all the way down to $8. What could you possibly say about this at that point in time? It's on its death throes. This company, this ticker, whatever it is, you look at this from a straight chartist, just a straight price action, that company is about to fail. Is it going to make it through this? Now, obviously, the first place that you have when you actually look at this here to whether or not it will get through the crisis is you do the same thing that we did in the prelude to the Bitcoin crises. We have a high, we can earmark the 50%. So let's do that now. So I'm just going to go about the approximate settings. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take the Fibonacci tool that's already edited. We're going to go from this high and we're going to go to this low. So now we have the 50% mark. We have the low, we have the 50% mark, and you can see here, as reliable as ever, the 50% mark hit a inflection area or hit a area where it had a reaction and it sold off from that point forward. So we can just clearly see that right here. That's why we use these levels. Now, if we actually, let me rename some of these things so we can make this a little bit easier. So now let's break this down with some details. The first inflection area, the major inflection area here is from June 1998 to right around November 1998. This is the first inflection area. So you can use this inflection area as the first area that price really moved from. It is the price memory of this chart. So we use that going forward, and that's why you see a value channel from here to the low here. So that's the overall value channel. Now, when price broke through that inflection area, this is crisis 1 for Amazon. So this whole area was crisis 1 for Amazon. Will it survive? Is it going to survive the dot-com era? Is it going to have higher aspirations? Is it even going to be a company? Is it viable? All those questions were being asked here. Of course, there's larger narratives of what was happening in the overall markets and everything else. But you have a value channel here that you could trade against once the 50% held up. Really, what are the two important levels? Well, the first important level is obviously the low, and then the 50% and the all-time high. That's the only thing that matters. Like, I'm trying to break these down to just binary decisions. The quicker you can do this in trading, a lot of times, the more successful you'll be at making decisions in your trades. Now let's go through and just broad strokes what happened. So first up, it held the lower value channel, held up well, continued to move off that up to right around the $58 level, $60 level or so, which is 50% of the all-time high. We could relate this to what I talked about in the Bitcoin with the chart, which is the mass awareness. So this is Amazon's first mass awareness high right here. And then this is 50%. It failed for quite a while. And then what happened? it came back and it had its second crisis. So the first crisis was here. The first crisis was here. This is first crisis area. Second crisis, always test the first crisis area, and then you want to see it hold up. And that's what happened here. That's the second crisis. So this is Amazon's second crisis as far as whether or not it's a viable company, as far as it actually, is going to survive, as far as it's a viable idea in the marketplace. Now, if we put this line here right around the 50%, so this is the 50%, we'll see something really interesting that we will notice in the Bitcoin charts and every other chart that typically follows this pattern is you see a break of a major area, the 50% area. As you could see here, it gapped up this day. It started to hold the RDA all through this. It gapped up here, held the RDA, and then what happened from this point forward? From this point forward, once it held the RDA, and then this is the 50% mark, this yellow line here, what did it do? It created another very important inflection area in the chart. So this, as far as Amazon is concerned, once it held the 50% area, is another very important inflection area. And what do we see? We see the pattern that we would like to see as chartists. Now it did break eventually. We do see the pattern we like to see as chartists, which is first up. What happens is that it came back, retest the inflection area, held up, continued to come up. And then what do we see here? We see another interesting thing, which is really what I would consider a third crisis for Amazon. And this is where this leads into what we're going to talk about with Bitcoin. So the third crisis with Amazon here hit right around November 08. So in the 08 market crash, around the housing crash and everything else, right around that time, there is the third crisis for Amazon. And what did the third crisis do? If you look and see here, and I know I'm talking at a high level, first up, the first inflection area, the major inflection area where it held the 50% mark, it broke. So it broke that inflection area. And then where did it stop? Let's just look and see where it stopped. So we'll just go here and we'll just align this with here. Just say where it stopped. We'll just not going to be completely accurate. Once again, this is for example purposes. So we're not going to try to be so accurate, but we're going to be accurate enough so that in the videos going forward, we can talk about the same patterns. So where did it stop? Well, it stopped at a very interesting area. If you look at this chart here, and I know there's a lot on this chart right now. First up, it didn't test the first crisis area. So that's important. Ideally, what you want to see on something like this is you don't want to see the first crisis area test. You want to see the second crisis area or the third, or really the second crisis area tested. And what you'd like to see in that second area when it's tested is a key level of that second area being held up. And you can easily do that just by going here, creating a value channel from here and here, and seeing did a key level hold up. And that's just very approximate, so I'm not going to do it perfect, but I just wanted to draw this in real time. What you can't see, which is hard to see, is that 25% of this overall value channel. So from a perspective of what you're looking at from a value channel, is you're really looking and say, do the key levels hold up? And then when they hold up, what happens to momentum thereafter? What happens when it recaptures the RDA? What happens when it recaptures the 200 mix? What happens when it recaptures momentum? That's really what you're asking. So a test down and a strong reaction is something you would look for. And that's something you'd like to see. And you'd like to see the reaction really be a second thought, or it would be, it happens quick and then it goes away and it's out of that crisis. That's what you want to see in a third crisis scenario. So as we see here, that's exactly what Amazon did. It came down, and I know it's hard to see, but this level here, right around 34.51, of that overall value channel is 25% of that value channel. Ideally, a stronger move would have been to hold up right around the 50% mark, right here. That would have been a stronger move, but we do see the first actual reaction area is right there, and it did hold up. Eventually came up to that channel, and then sold off, and then came back down to the 25% and held the 25%. From there, it started capturing momentum, and from there, once it captured momentum, it continued up. And if we just zoom out in the chart on the weekly basis, we can just see once it then recaptured the November high, the November 1999 high from this crisis area, What did it do? It created an additional inflection area right around here, what you would expect. If we went to the daily chart, you would see an additional inflection area. And from there, it just took off. Even on the weekly basis, you can see the weekly basis, the RDA, the yellow line held, and it just took off. So this is a success story. This is a new asset or a new ticker or something new that hit the marketplace that had 3 crises that when you can look at the chart and you can look at the price action, you can clearly identify 3 crises. And if you wanted to, you could probably go back to the news stories of that time and find the narratives that would closely align with what the price action was telling you. We do see here, not Bitcoin, but Amazon is starting to really do a major sell-off here. So it's really starting to come off to a major sell-off point here. But it's really hard to say that if you would have bought Amazon way back there on the 3rd crisis, that you wouldn't be happy to still be up $2,300. So it probably is a good trade. But obviously, we're starting to see a sell-off in the markets. The next ticker we're going to show now is an actual example of a failure. And I decided to just keep this short. That will be a separate video. So if you're on the page where all the videos are listed, it'll be right below this. If not, it's the next video in this series. I'll look forward to seeing you in that video.